In our first video about ecology, we're going to learn what ecology is, and we're also going to look at the different components that go into a food chain and a food web, and then we'll get into food chains and food webs for another video. But ecology is the study of how living things and non-living parts of the environment, how do they interact? And this happens every day all around us. We interact with other living things. We also interact with non-living parts of our environment as well. And ecology is going to look at the world as a whole through all these interactions and the interdependence, how we rely on each other in order to survive. And when we say interdependence, we're referring to those interactions, all interactions, whether it's with other living organisms as well as our non-living surroundings, but we do rely on our environment as well as other living things within our environment in order to survive, and they rely on us too. So our survival does depend on each other. I liked this quote, and we'll talk more about this as we get into food chains and food webs, and we can maybe see some of this. But when one tugs at a single thing in nature, he finds it attached to the rest of the world. So you are not alone as an individual or as a human species in this world. You definitely have a responsibility to help other living things in nature to be able to allow them to thrive and reproduce so that they can be a part of our ecosystem and a part of ecology, because we do rely on them as they rely on us. Getting into the different kind of players that involved in ecology, we kind of have living things grouped into several different categories based off of what part they play. So for a producer, this would be anything that uses the sun as its energy source. And we know the sun, we appreciate the sun, it provides warmth, but it also gives us light, it allows the plants to grow, and anything that does photosynthesis and uses the sun for its energy source would be considered a producer. And the most of the sun's energy is not used at all. Scientists think that only about less than 1% of the sun's true energy is used by living things. So we have a lot of potential there to access more energy from the sun. Another name for producers is called an autotroph. So whenever you say autotroph, you're talking about producers, and when you say producers, you're talking about autotrophs. And an autotroph captures sunlight and it's going to convert it into food. So photosynthesis being a key part here because they make their own food, but you have things like algae and different plants that you might be familiar with. So a producer, again, because I didn't define it earlier, is an organism that can make their own food. So autotroph, producer, could be microscopic, it could be all the, this tree as a whole. So they definitely come in different varying sizes. We mentioned photosynthesis, so as a quick review definition, you need sunlight energy going in. They also need carbon dioxide and water, so those things are going into the plant as well. And when the plant has those three items, then it can produce its own food, so it makes carbohydrates within the leaves, and then it can also release oxygen into the air, which you and I benefit from when we breathe. And then we have we have more producers. Sorry, there's land producers, which would be plants, and then we've already mentioned algae, which would be a producer found in water. So producers are found on land and in the water. Alright, now to consumers. A consumer is a heterotroph. Consumer and heterotroph mean the same thing, just like autotroph and producer did. A heterotroph is an organism that relies on something else for its energy. We also call those consumers. And there's several different categories depending on what they consume. So for instance, we have some zebra and a cow, and those would be considered herbivores because they only eat plant material, whether it's grass or hay, grain of some sort. They don't go out and eat meat. We have carnivores like jaws or a wolf, and they are meat eaters. So they, and occasionally it's not that a wolf might not eat a berry, but it's not their main energy source. Okay, they are carnivores. They are meat eaters. And then another type of consumer or heterotroph would be an omnivore. And an omnivore is kind of a little bit of both. They eat plant, but they also eat animal. And again, this is on a day-to-day part of their daily diet, not they're scourging for food and they are starving and so they eat what they can eat. This is on a day-to-day basis. These are omnivores. We have bears, turtles, humans. Most would be omnivores. If there are humans who have actively said, I will not eat meat of any type, then we would put them in a different category. But the majority of humans are omnivores. Possums, and then you have like crows and pigs even are omnivores. Two other categories briefly here, we have detritivores, and detritivores are often called scavengers, so they feed on the remains or dead items. So you have snails, also worms are detritivores. And then we also have decomposers, and decomposers break down and absorb the nutrients as they're breaking it apart. So to decompose something, you're breaking it apart. But you also have to absorb the nutrients as you're breaking it apart. So we have like fungus, mushrooms, those are decomposers. You can see them here. They're actually on a log that had fallen over from a tree, and they are decomposing that tree year after year. That tree is eventually going to be gone. They will have decomposed it and also absorbed the nutrients from it at the same time. So that's just a quick introduction into the different types of living organisms, whether it's an autotroph or a heterotroph or a producer or consumer.